Hello and welcome to today's Australian Water School webinar titled How Can I Help? I'm your host, Cray Price, and I'm honored to be able to introduce you today to some experts in the field of water, sanitation, and hygiene. First of all, welcome to each of you attending in our truly global audience, as you can see in our attendee map here. But not only do we have a global spread of attendees today, our presenters are also coming to you straight from around the planet. And if you were to map out the projects that our presenters have been involved in over almost a century of collective career experience, it might look a bit like the attendee map that you see in the background. So we kicked off this year's webinar series with some fun hydraulic applications like water slides and rafting and surfing, but today we'll be getting a bit more serious. We'll be taking a break from our typical technical content, and we will introduce you to some water specialists who will share case studies for humanitarian aid projects, provide you with some resources, and issue a challenge to get involved. So to set the stage for today's discussion, first of all, what is WASH? That's a term you'll hear again and again today. While most of our previous webinars have focused on surface water and groundwater and how that water moves, today we're talking about the water that you drink, the water that you wash your hands with, and the water at the bottom of a pit toilet. Our presenters will talk about WASH projects, the dangers of deficiencies in water sources, and the tremendous difference that improvements can make for local communities. So that's water, sanitation, and hygiene. Maybe that should be WSAH, WASA, but the WA is for water, and then sanitation and hygiene are in the S and H. Now, we had a tremendous response to our last webinar. 2,500 attendees registered to hear about the recent Australian floods and how we might be better prepared next time around. But while we do need to work on improving planning and modeling practices over the coming years, there are immediate needs right now. So in addition to highlighting WASH projects, today's presenters also include representatives of Engineers Without Borders, who have recently put out a call to action together with Engineers Australia for practicing engineers to get involved. But no matter where you are in the world, if you have time or talents or resources to contribute, we want to help make that happen. For those of you watching the YouTube recording, in the description below, you'll find a link to a page that includes all of the resources that our presenters will be covering today. So how many times do we see something on the news and we say someone should really do something about that? Well, today we hope you'll see that that's true. Someone really should do something about the global wash issues, the flood relief efforts, and other urgent needs. And today we have the distinct privilege of meeting some people who have spent their careers not just doing something about it themselves, but encouraging and facilitating involvement by others, who today include all of us attending live or watching this recording. So our live panel discussion today includes three presenters, Steve and Stephanie from Engineers Without Borders and Emily Rand from UNICEF. Steve and Stephanie will highlight local case studies in Vanuatu, and then we'll hear from Martha and Matthews at UNICEF and the World Bank about some insights based on the projects that they've been involved in over the years. And then Emily will sum it all up with some global insights based on a career that has taken her around the world to areas struggling with WASH issues. So Steve, Emily, Stephanie, if you can turn your cameras on, just let us know where you're coming to us from today and give us a bit of background about yourselves. If we can start with Steve.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you for having us, everyone. Before we before we begin, Engineers Without Borders would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the first people of the countries in which we are dialing in. As I am based in Vanuatu, I would like to acknowledge the people of Evate Island, where Port Vila is, capital town, and the land on which I am on, and would like to extend that acknowledgement to the traditional owners of the lands that you are on too. So thank you very much.
Okay, excellent. Good to meet you, and over to you, Steph.
Thanks, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie, and I am working as the country manager for Engineers Without Borders. I'm normally based in Vanuatu, but due to some COVID related situation, the country is currently in lockdown. So I am currently in Victoria, speaking from Victoria. My background is water and environmental engineering, and I'm very happy to be with you today.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Over to you, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily Rand, and I'm joining you today from Zambia, where it is currently 2 a.m. And I lead UNICEF's WASH program. Thanks.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we're glad to have you joining us from all around the world. There are tremendous needs out there at the moment, and we are looking forward to hearing from our presenters. And so, again, we will hear from people in different areas of the world today. But you know, these things can happen everywhere where humanitarian relief is required. Anywhere you go, and we will hear from Engineers Without Borders about needs right here in Australia today for engineers with water skills. How can you help today? What can you get involved in here locally in the community, and hopefully, if we can spark some interest in getting involved in your local communities yourself, then it's easier to get involved in those organizations as they in their global relief efforts as well. So over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Craig. So Engineers Without Borders, myself and Steph will be presenting some slides regarding case studies in water sector in Vanuatu. Before that, I will be presenting an overview of basically the objective of this presentation is to overall objective of this presentation is to get a sense of what EWB or Engineers Without Borders does in terms of appropriate technology, our vision, our shared values with the communities that we work with, and also explain the different ways to get involved with us. We also have some highlight cases that from our work from in Vanuatu. Thanks, Steph. Next slide. So who is EWB? Engineers Without Borders is a development organization that works domestically with indigenous communities and operates internationally in Southeast Asia, the Pacific, through our offices in Cambodia, Timor-Leste, and Vanuatu. Our focus is on sustainable and equitable technology development for communities we work with. Our vision, I'm reading just like a bit stuff. Our vision is a world where technology benefits all. Our mission is redefining the purpose and impact of engineering practices as a critical enabler of sustainable development. And last of all, our purpose is to harnessing the potential of engineering to create an equitable reality for people, for the planet and its people. Thanks, Steph. Next slide. In this presentation, in this slide, I would give an overview of the technology development approach. What it's all about. It's basically an agnostic approach of technology and engineering, meaning that we don't focus only on one particular type of technology. It could be any technology for development, emergency responses, and in that line of technology works. What WASH is a key component of Vanuatu technology program. Stephanie, our country manager, will share with us two case studies of where WASH comes in as a key component of the Vanuatu technology program. Bringing back to the topic of today's seminar, Stephanie will also explain how engineers in Australia or New Zealand can directly get involved in this in these programs with our First Nation program, or even the recent flood responses project in Australia and in the national programs in Timor-Leste, Cambodia, or Vanuatu. Back to this diagram, I would like to just briefly give an overview of this diagram we're looking at. If you look closely, this design stages are general terms that we could comprehend, but let me just give you a brief gist of it. Okay, so the technology development approach is a new approach for structuring and practicing technology development project works at Engineers Without Borders Australia. Okay, it presents a common language for discussing solution development, a new tailored version of human-centered design, now termed as TDA or Technology Development Approach, specifically to fit the works that Engineers Without Borders undertakes. Our approach not only looks at the design and development of these technological artifacts, but also the enabling environment of these artifacts. to create a positive and sustainable impact in communities. The shift towards the TDA aligns with the EWB strategic vision of a world where technology benefits all, and the belief that engineers, as people who create, engage, and maintain technology, have the unique capacity and obligation to help steward these technologies in a positive and sustainable direction. Just from my experience, one of the strengths of using this methodology is the time spent in communities and with community partners, and the tools provided such as empathy mappings, running focus group discussions, which allows us to develop a technology fitting the context, which we will respond to the actual needs of the community. Just to give you a little bit of idea on the different stages of this approach. If you can see there, there's roughly 5 stages, or 8 if you want to call it. First one there, if you look, is the strategy and planning. The second one is a pre-design, and then we have a concept. We proceed on to the detailed design where we prototype or build this technology, and then the last stage is where we pilot, and it's all. The last stage also allows us to do modifications, get feedback from the community if it requires us to do any changes, large changes before we scale up the technology. Then that stage allows us. Back to the strategy and planning, that's basically where we source our ideas or identify opportunities. We go out, we meet with people, we talk to our community leads and other key stakeholders where we share the same values and visions. And also part of that is we are able to use a tool to screen some of these ideas, and then by utilizing universal criteria, EWB or Engineers Without Borders strategy and policy. So from that, we then proceed on to the pre-design stage, where in this stage, we now have a project selected, and it could be initiated at this stage. We initiate the project by developing project plans, map out the key stakeholders, that engaging with our pilot communities, meet with the chiefs or people who are responsible in little initiatives happening in communities. We run awareness programs. We do focus group discussions to get feedback on specific topics regarding the project. Later, after this one, we now proceed on to the concept where we will develop CAD models of an iteration that has been co-developed with our participants during focus groups, for instance. And then the next stage after that is our detailed design phase, where we, for example, we produce construction plans for actually building the particular prototype. And then the last stage is where we have it piloted with the community, our pilot community, where we have been engaging with. And yeah, that is pretty much the gist of this whole process. I will now hand it over back to our country manager, Steph, to share with us 2 case studies where he was where WASH comes in as a key component of a technology development program in Vanuatu. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Steve, for this overview of the technology development approach or human-centered design approach that we have adapted and which we are trialing and working with in the different countries. So I wanted this the rest of the presentation to give you some more ideas in the ground of 2 of the projects that we've been working on in the last few years. And one that I've been very involved in is the development of the sanitation hygiene guidelines with the Ministry of Health in Vanuatu since 2018. So this is one of the examples of what Steve has referred to as the enabling environment, which in this case is not about the development of a technology, but what policy or guidelines framework is going to help the country to adopt the best and suitable technologies, but making sure that these technologies are used in the long term to optimize or to maximize the impact for communities. The need for the project was identified even before I started with lots of work, and so the need assessments, for example, highlighted that 1 in 10 children under 5 risked diarrhea during any of the 2-week period before the survey was done. There were many provincial clinics which didn't have an adequate toilet. The lack of soap was a common thing in institutional settings, and that figure there of only 28% of toilets in schools which were in good condition, so about a third. The guideline itself started, the journey that I was part of started in November 2018 with the development of a joint vision and scope together with the teams from national and provincial level of the Ministry of Health, as well as colleagues from the WASH cluster or sanitation working groups. Between December 2018 and May 2019, there's a long period of various consultations, and here there's a photo of the workshop with VSPD, the Vanuatu Society for People with Disability, so that our guideline gains inputs from people with various disabilities and for all the technologies to become accessible to those with specific needs in communities. The April and June 2019 saw us doing some trials, so further consultation in Santo, Island and Malekula province, and then in March 2020, we got the approval from the Executive Committee of Ministry of Health of the guideline and start of the rollout. So since then, we've been working on the rollout. But going back to the start of this guidelines development, we quickly identified the need for breaking it down into 3 different volumes. So the rural communities, one, addressing sanitation guidelines for household and institutional settings, was the first one, with 80% of Vanuatu's population living in rural areas. The volume 2 and volume 3 were then going to develop guidelines for emergency response, knowing that Vanuatu is the first country prone to natural disasters, and then urban communities. In terms of the technical areas that we covered, excreta disposal was the first one, but wastewater disposal is also included when it's related to the hand washing practices, as well as solid waste management related to hygiene practices is also covered, and in particular menstrual hygiene management. So these gave the framework for the different types of consultations with the stakeholders, so Ministry of Health, Department of Water Resources, Ministry of Education and Trainings, Ministry of Climate Change Adaptation, Ministry of Justice from the necessary inputs from the inclusion point of view, which falls under this ministry in Vanuatu. 8 NGOs were also consulted and in various working groups, as well as international organizations such as UNICEF. 3 communities, as I mentioned, Santo and Malekula, across Santo and Malekula, joined, and we captured all their feedback with where we're at, as well as private sector, which will be key as part of the rollout of the guideline. The methods were to do consultations with the sanitation working group in particular, but also one-on-one meetings with key stakeholders and community members, as well as long phase of field testing, as I was mentioning, with trial workshops, demonstration toilets, and informal interviews. Here are a few pictures of some of the field testing. So the first one with some of the reinforcing slabs, which we based on some of the construction techniques which were used by the provincial teams in Santo in particular. The middle one with some of the slab and VIP vent pipe in construction. And then the last one, all the work and conversation which is taking place during all these workshops on the best spot for the hand washing station in some of the critical spaces to allow people to wash their hands just after they use the toilet. The outcomes are hopefully a set of guideline tools and appendices, highlighting some of the most adequate and technically adequate solutions for Vanuatu, going from ventilated improved pit latrines, like the sketch on the left-hand side, up to a septic tank and drainage trenches, flush systems. Some of the key principles which were highlighted during the consultation, in which the guideline highlights and provides example, also the environmental sustainability of systems to protect the different water resources, in particular, receiving all the waste. Acceptability, because of this long consultation and feedback period, I think one of the strengths is that we had a lot of time to test and to get sufficient feedback so that the solution is accepted and well known by everyone when the guideline was just coming out. Inclusiveness, we've talked about it already in terms of making sure that all the solutions were appropriate for the different needs of community members. Affordability, a lot of conversation have happened around, in particular, the structure and what available local materials were within communities for, so adapting the bill of quantities to make sure everyone who's responsible for their own sanitation would be able to afford any of the system types that we are recommending. And finally, in terms of resilience, the idea was maybe not to always recommend the strongest cyclone-proof technologies, but in the resilience here comes with the idea that people would be able to rebuild very quickly toilets themselves after the cyclone has damaged an area. And so here I'm just showing a few pictures of the SketchUp drawings, which are all gathered in the guidelines. Here, a poor flush system with a pit underneath, the associated bills of quantities that are available, some easy to use checklists, which this one is in English, but available in Bislama, that were used again by the different field workers, and quickly able, so it's based on the water safety plan, or here the sanitation surveys, where people are able to assess very quickly the quality of an existing toilet and do the necessary upgrades or replace the toilet. The guideline also includes some appendix for contractors, as I said, in terms of the rollout and the ownership of some, or the involvement of some of the private sector to be able to respond with all the right specifications to what the government is expecting. So this is the first example. The second example is more in relation to the water project, with the development of a manual for village water committees and plumbers. The need was identified by the Department of Water, and the project was supported by UNICEF to update and expand existing pre and post water supply construction trainings. There were existing manuals, but there were a need perceived to include additional community focused in the guidance, improve integration with the current and national implementation plan, and DWSSP, which is the Drinking Water Safety and Security Plan program of the Department of Water Resources. It also was requested to provide furthermore current guidance and refine into a more cohesive package of training. The last one was to investigate options for improving the support to rural water communities. In terms of the milestones, the project basically happened over a year last year, where it started with a review of existing materials, drafting a new training syllabus, and present to the wash class sector, who was our main point of contact to give us feedback, and observe existing trainings in village context. So again, spending all the time, like for the sanitation guideline, to be able to observe and build on what is there, and make sure basically we bring as many field workers on board from the start of the development of these works. Then the third step was to develop the draft materials and present to the WASH cluster. We ran trial sessions with the new training materials in the village context. And we ran last December some facilitator training of trainer trainings. Finally, we presented to the Department of Water some remote village support options in January this year. So here are a few photos of the type of plumbers training and using all the different tools for the trainers to be able to train then communities in maintaining a water system, with some of the reflections around what the main arrangements could be in communities and responsibilities for everyone, and the diplomas at the end of the session. The training of trainers, I'm just going to show a few of the highlights, which again comes from incredible inputs from the Vanuatu Society with people with disability, where they highlighted that 20% of the, according to the 2020 census, had a form of disability. So the importance of, for example, adding inclusive options in the budget at the start of projects, which is often forgotten. Community surveys should capture also enough information for good inclusive designs of water systems. And the recommendation around contacting VSPD for all the data and knowledge on community before starting a project. So all of these inputs were then incorporated in the training material. We also had inputs from UNICEF on household filtration techniques, water quality testing, and gender inclusivity. Other presentation included health and safety, community mobilization, and sanitation guidelines that I've talked about the previous project. Here's some more pictures about what the participants got to do in practice. And here, by the end of the session, they were able to build a tap stand, like following the Department of Water standards. And a few more pictures. The outputs are a summary in Bislama of the different sections which seem to be the most important. So here, a bit of Bislama lesson. Water belongs everyone, going from the general awareness and methods for promoting inclusive water systems. These are some of the additions compared to the previous version. I'm not going to go through all the different sections, but maybe this one, the section 15, where we basically had some discussion for the plumbers who must work with the community disaster committee to ensure the required actions are taken before and after a disaster. So some of these also were new material compared to the previous edition. To finish this, a highlight about our international program, I wanted to reflect on some of the enabling factors which our team focuses on to not only avoid failures, but maximize the impact. And I think one of the key aspects is the quality of the engagement with all the relevant local organizations. So the long time spent and the understanding, and that's linked to that second point, understanding of the government's priorities, planning and resources allow us, I think, to work closely with the government schedules and be able to build on strong relationship over the years to produce an output which basically everyone will know when we produce the manual or the guideline, and it's no surprise for anyone having to use it. The third point is about the thinking from the start about the rollout of the guideline to have the maximum impact. And the last one is about any inputs that we would like to have and working together with here the ministries in terms of the monitoring and evaluation framework to be able to measure this impact. So you've all come to this seminar because you also may want to know in terms of the different engagement streams at Engineers Without Borders. And there's 4 of them that I'm going to touch on. There's different types of, so the first opportunity is to engage as a national office volunteer. so that you would support colleagues supporting the overseas and First Nation programs. The second one is about project volunteer. When Steve is developing a new technology, then specific inputs from different types of engineering are required, and these are the type of project volunteering opportunities. Then the field professional, together in collaboration with the Australian volunteer program. Some engineers are, sorry about that, are going and joining us in Vanuatu, Timor-Leste or Cambodia with specific skill set and working with different either government or other partner organization. And the last one is pro bono volunteering, when volunteers are joining us as part of the pro bono project of the engineering companies. And this can be done remotely. We've had some examples in the recent years of doing this too. Finally, other than international program, there are current opportunities to do with the New South Wales Northern Rivers Emergency Flood Recovery. So multiple roles available here, and I encourage you to look at our website where all these, there's an advertisement about all these engineering volunteering roles, with the requirement of spending at least 3 days in the affected areas to do some assessment. So different types of engineering are required, and I think there's going to be some more information about how to apply. That's it for me. I just would like to also acknowledge the Australian government who is supporting us with the ANCP program, supporting us with some of the projects that I've been talking about. And I'm looking forward for your question, continuing the discussion. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Steve and Steph, for giving us an overview of Engineers Without Borders. There are ways to get involved, and we will keep providing some of these links. These will be live links for you that you can get to through some of the resources that we'll provide at the end of this discussion session. Next, we'll hear from Martha Hokonya, UNICEF WASP specialist based in Sudan. Now, you can read about Martha's extensive background here, and now we're privileged to hear about some of her project-related insights.
Good morning to you all. My name is Martha Hokonya. I'm a water, sanitation, and hygiene specialist working with UNICEF in Khartoum, Sudan. Today I'm going to be making a presentation to you just to show you some of the water supply interventions that I've worked in across 3 countries, Zimbabwe, Sudan, and Nigeria, in my work with UNICEF. Of course, I've worked with other aid agencies and even the private sector, also even in South Sudan, but today I'm just going to be focusing on these 3 to just share some of these experiences. In the picture there, what you see is a typical water facility that is very common in this Niger Delta region of Nigeria. So these facilities, they are adapted to suit different needs. They are adapted to suit different geological conditions in different communities. In some communities, because of high salt intrusions, because the communities in Niger Delta are very close to the Atlantic Ocean, and they're also big wetlands. So sometimes there is need to even link some water treatment units to these kind of facilities for ion removal, and even in some cases reverse osmosis. So there I'm just sharing some 3 different types of water facilities in 3 different countries. From the first picture there, that is a typical hand pump in Zimbabwe called the Bush Type B hand pump. This is back then around 2014. So this is a very simple technology. It's cheaper in terms of constructing, in terms of capital costs, and also easy to use for communities and also easy to maintain. Around that hand pump there, you can see the water point committee that is trained to manage, to operate, and to run these facilities in the communities in rural Zimbabwe. In the second picture, of course, in the sector, there's been continuous technological advancements to proffer solutions for more climate adaptive options for communities. So there you have an innovation that we are piloting here in Sudan, This is called a solar hand pump. It is a hybrid system. It works both with solar and it also works as a hand pump. So during those high days of good sunlight, the solar can really pump well and also is able to fill up the tank in a short space of time. But even when there are days of high cloud cover, the hand pump can still work. But both of them can still operate simultaneously at the same time to produce water. So the advantage is there. It produces more water. It can save more people, because a standard hand pump can save up to 500 people. But this one, you see that it can go up to 1,000 people because of the high yielding, because of the increase in water supply. Then the other one, like I said, this is Niger Delta support. So this is Niger Delta project that I worked in Nigeria. So these kind of projects, like I was saying, they come in different sizes depending on the water demand, depending also on the population growth in the areas. They come in different sizes, 24,000 liters, some are 36,000 liters, but they are all solar driven, and they don't have a hybrid system. They work totally on solar, and they are also connected to a reticulation of a radius of around 1.5 kilometers in the communities, connected to different water collecting points. So they are coming to the successes. In the picture, you see different sanitation facilities. Of course, for us to have a very successful water supply project, it has to go with good sanitation. It also has to go with hygiene, because we are trying to look at addressing the challenges in the whole water supply chain, right from the collection point where the water is being collected to the transportation and to the point of use. So if we do not address sanitation, we will recontaminate. Even there's a risk of recontamination of these water supply facilities, and again we'll end up losing the benefits. So these are two. This other one is in Zimbabwe, the other one is in Nigeria. So what are some of these successes? The successes that we have seen. We have seen the improved health and well-being of communities, significant reduction in diarrheal diseases, especially in children under 5s. Even when you collect statistics around the health centers that surround these, where these interventions are going on, you see that there is a significant reduction in diarrheal diseases amongst children. It also improves learning outcomes for girls, because as you know, in Africa, mostly it's women and girls that are saddled with the responsibility of collecting water for their families. They have to walk for long distances. They have to also spend a lot of time in search of water, and sometimes they are also at risk in terms of their own personal security. So all these interventions, they've also helped to increase even productive time for women, so that they can also have more time to focus on other productive duties for their families, as well as improving productivity for young girls. Also in terms of nutrition, water and sanitation contribute largely to reduction in stunting rates. So this is also another huge success that the sector can actually boast of over the years, and even in these projects that I'm talking about. It promotes peace building, and more and more in the sector, we are using water supply projects as an entry point to actually promoting social cohesion, peace building amongst communities, because water points can actually be a source of conflict. That is, if they are limited in terms of availability. And in this Niger Delta region I'm talking about, it was a huge success because it helped to bring communities together. There was a lot of conflict around limited competition for limited resources, but we brought together the community leaders, the youth leaders, the women leaders, the water point committees to have effective dialogue, and this really helped for them to plan together, to manage together, and to utilize together their resources, thereby promoting peace within their communities. Also, in this area, again, there was a lot of discontentment in the Niger Delta region by the people to the government, because this is the oil-rich zone of Nigeria, and people were disgruntled that most of their resources are being taken to develop elsewhere and not being reinvested in their communities. So we also brought in government to also co-finance the water supply activities that UNICEF was doing in order to give back part of that investment to the community, and this really also helped to promote peace in these communities. It also helps to create employment. We have trained various local area mechanics that are also paid by communities to do repairs for these water facilities. Caretakers are also paid, and also some PPP, public-private partnerships, are being created, and small business owners have started getting into the business of selling spare parts for water facilities, and overall poverty is reduced. We have income generating projects as well, even in emergency prone areas where you have internally displaced populations in the camps. They have excess water, and sometimes they are selling this excess water to host communities through kiosks. They are also doing some small livelihood projects and reinvesting this money towards the overall operation and maintenance of their water facilities. So what are some of the challenges? Poor ownership by governments, and most local authorities still have very weak capacity to be able to sustain the investments that are being made in the sector. There's still low political will. This is what I was saying. Although with increased advocacy, there was a lot of interest was generated, and this resulted in really seeing an increase in the sector level investment, especially in Nigeria. Donor dependency by communities, looking at these affected by emergencies, they still have this feeling that aid agencies are the ones responsible even for repairing facilities when they break down. Poor operation and maintenance, weak supply chains for provision of spare parts is still another big challenge that still needs to continuously be worked on to improve it. And high capital costs for solar modules, but now we have seen a significant reduction in solar components, and this is really helping because, of course, solar has huge benefits when you look at the life cycle cost, even though the initial capital investments can be high. So more and more the sector is now moving towards investing more in solar systems for better climate resilience.
So those are some great examples of hands-on involvement in local projects. Now we'll hear from Matthews Mulakal, World Bank water specialist, about some big picture elements in funding large projects and partnerships and what helps make them successful.
Hi everyone, I am Matthews Mulakal, water specialist working at the World Bank New Delhi office. Over the past 20 years, I worked in a range of water projects, starting with the state level water supply and sanitation improvement projects to national level sanitation campaigns, and also utility level service improvement program to multi-state dam rehabilitation and groundwater management projects. Over this experience, I learned a couple of broad lessons on what does make a successful water project. First, we need to have a multidisciplinary approach for implementing water projects. This is necessary to address behavior of people, increasing climate variability, environmental and social impacts, and financial sustainability of these water projects. In the World Bank, I have seen very effective teams involving a range of specialists, starting with engineers, economists, then environmental specialists, social specialists, climate specialists, risk management specialists, communication specialists, and so on. Despite having an obvious need, many of the implementing agencies or utilities still do not have a multidisciplinary approach for water projects. This is an urgent area that requires attention and change. Secondly, we need to wisely select the indicators to measure the success of a water supply project or any water project. Traditionally, we used to use indicators like how many villages, cities, people are covered with water supply and sanitation coverage. A problem with having only such indicators is we tend to focus on completing an infrastructure and connecting a village or a city or some households with pipelines, water pipelines, or toilet facilities. The problem actually starts once such connections are completed, whether people are getting adequate services, whether people are using the facilities provided, whether services are regular, if an asset is damaged, whether it is replaced or repaired on a timely manner. These are the critical issues to ensure success of a water project. So we need to include such indicators also in the water projects. I'm seeing that such a change is slowly happening with introduction of design, build, operate projects, which is a welcome change. Let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Well, great. That gives us a good feel for some of the challenges and opportunities covering a wide range of project scales right across the globe. Now we're looking forward to hearing from Emily. I think we've all dreamed of doing the types of things that Emily has spent her career doing if we only had the courage and fortitude to just head out to the areas in need and devote our time and talents to providing aid. Well, that's what Emily has done with her career, and I think we can all benefit from her insights and from rising to the challenges that she'll issue to us today. So over to you, Emily.
Great. I'm so glad we've heard some really good examples from Vanuatu, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, and India. And now I just want to give a little bit of a global overview. Currently, a child is 3 times more likely to die actually from water-related issues, even if they're in a protracted conflict. So 3 times more likely to die from a water-related issue than from the actual conflict. These photos are from Indonesia and East Timor, and I want to share that the top of this slide says half the world does not have access to safe sanitation. But I want you to know these photos, that doesn't count here. These are good examples of safely managed sanitation. You can safely manage sanitation through a pit latrine, especially like that covered one there. Something that's cleanable, durable, and coverable really can be safely managed sanitation. If you go to the next slide. You go to the next slide. This is why I asked that question. How many of you washed your hands? I'm very impressed with how many of you said you wash your hands. I often joke that, all 8 billion of us on the planet don't wash hands as often as we should. But currently, the reality is that 3 billion people do not even have a hand washing facility with soap where they could do that on a regular basis. Behavior change is hard, especially in places where water is scarce. So I think it's also interesting to think about how much behavior change is really required. In the US, after 12 months of promotion and intense feedback in an ICU unit, healthcare workers still did not wash their hands 50% of the time. So I think if we really want to impact health, it's not just about giving people water, it's also about creating systems and working with government and making sure that aspects of sanitation and therefore hand washing are addressed as well. If you move to the next slide, I'll go back to the thing that you were probably thinking when you first heard about this webinar that we would talk about. So 2.2 billion people lack access to safe drinking water. I hope that now that you've heard that global statistic, you're thinking, well, how can I help? And I just want to say I started my career as a Peace Corps volunteer, which is much like the Engineers Without Borders program that Stephanie and Stephen talked about. And it was a really good program. And I'm just so grateful I was able to be a Peace Corps volunteer in Lesotho. I was embedded in a government program, and I learned from great Lesotho engineers, managers, and builders. So really, I would say number one, if you go to a resource poor setting for a long period of time, learn the language, and support government activities in really remote areas. Next slide. So I shared that, some upsetting statistics, but I do want you to know that 1.8 billion people have gained access to drinking water since the year 2000. Governments, private sector, civil society, and individuals themselves are really investing their money, their time, and ensuring that even the most vulnerable populations have access. So if you want to learn more now, I've got if you go move to the next slide. If you want to learn more, depends on how much you want to learn. So I did include a little tweet there. You can do hashtag WASH Twitter. So that's water and sanitation hygiene. That's the acronym we use. So hashtag WASH Twitter. There's lots of little things if you just want to learn small things. But I also, if you're up for reading a little bit more, the UNICEF website is just a wealth of information. And all of those statistics that I shared are from the UNICEF and World Health Organization joint monitoring program, and some from a UNICEF special reports. If you really want to learn a lot more about this topic, I just wanted to let you know there are books about them. So Pipe Dreams and The Big Necessity both really talk about, their whole entire book's all about sanitation. So I think they're great. And if you really want something more lighthearted, well, Bill Bryson's At Home has a chapter on the bathroom, which is quite entertaining. If you move to the next slide, my last thing is just, maybe you want to do more, but you don't have a year to commit to Peace Corps or Engineers Without Borders. So I want to say, right where you are, wherever you are in the world, you can mentor young engineering students and young people starting their career. I work with UNICEF, and so I have to give a shout out to the young people out there who have so much to offer us, and we have so much to learn from them. So I really want to say that, first of all, every one of you, there's someone younger than you who wants to learn about engineering and water. Also, you can volunteer with an organization, depending on where you are. The webinar itself is based in Australia. But depending on where you are, there are often people migrating from other countries, and many of them are engineers who frankly have better qualifications than me. I met through the program Upwardly Global, I mentored many a PhD with an engineering background who had just arrived in the United States from another country. So I highly encourage you to reach out to new migrants to your own countries. And the last thing I guess I want to say is to just listen and learn from engineers in low-income settings. I have learned so much over my career, and I'm so grateful for all of the people that I've been able to work with and learn from over the years. So with that, over to you, Craig.
Absolutely thrilled that we were able to get you online there. We weren't sure how the internet connection would work out, but we're glad to have been able to hear that message. If you do want to help, and again, there are tremendous needs for help at the moment, all across where you are locally and overseas as well. Surfacewater.biz/aid is where I've put links. I'll put the link to the recording here as well. Links to these Engineers Without Borders projects here in Australia as part of the flood relief, and then also internationally how you can get involved. The UNICEF links, anything else we've talked about. Water Aid, which is a charity organization that is partnered up with our parent organization here as well for the water school. And then one thing I wanted to suggest, in my career or my current work in software modeling and kind of flood modeling, I get tons and tons of requests from people to help out. Now, what I'd like to do, instead of charging for consulting services, which I do for most of the world, is for those countries, those low-income countries, I don't like to charge there, but I get far more demand than I've got resources to be able to commit to that. So if you have some water skills, go through that link there at surfacewater.biz/aid. Contact me and let me know if you'd be willing to help. I'll forward you some of the many emails about surface water modeling that come from different areas areas. And if you're able to contribute, we've got 120 something webinars here that are free for everybody to attend, no matter what country you're from. We've got lots of resources through the Water School that can help. We'd like to build education, build some capabilities in areas where people might not have had the same opportunities. Now, if we could get the other panelists to come back on board now. Thanks to those who have been asking some questions through the Q&A line. We'd like to now just open it up for about 10 minutes of panel discussion time. I see a few questions that have been answered. Let's go back over to Steve first. There were a couple of questions about how that toilet system works, and whether it was a dry system, and also on the maintenance and operation later on. Do you need to come back in? So over to you, Steve, to address a couple of those questions that you've hit.
Great. I'll say something, but I'm happy for Steph to add anything if necessary. So how does the system work? Is it the dry system? I believe Chad and Steph put some answers in the Q&A. Let me just put out the two pitches. If you remember the slide, there are two pitches. There's one on the left, which is a VIP. So it's a dry system. It's a, what's it called, Steph? Ventilated improved pit.
Pit latrine, yeah.
Yep. And the other one is a typical on-site waste treatment system for, it's in Vanuatu, we don't have reticulated system. So every household seems to have these typical systems where you have a a septic, and then you have a effluent soakaway system, just having a pipe connecting that soakaway to allow effluent to flow through and basically discharge in a harsh environment. So it's safe in a way. I would love Steph to add on, or Jack.
Yeah, or would you like to actually expand with your experience on working with different type of system for sanitation challenging environments, which we're looking at in terms of expanding the type of solutions which we found were with the specific needs in area communities, for example. Do you want to expand on this one?
Great. Are you asking me to explain that composting?
Yeah, if you'd like, just to give another example of some of the context that the communities are facing.
Lovely. Yeah, so as Steph was saying, in Vanuatu, we have environment that, some places we have high water table. There's a pilot community we're working with at the moment in Port Vila. It's challenging because it is a peri-urban community, meaning it is located near the town, but it has this contextual challenge, meaning it's located near the lagoon, so they experience whenever there's cyclones or heavy rain, flooding can come up to like a meter. So it's very unsafe for even water seal toilets or any other system, traditional existing system. So we're working with the pilot community to come up with a compostable system that we will be able to contain everything, feces and all this, and then everything will be, aid into composting. So over a period of 18 months or less, we can transform all these feces, keep it dry. We have some operational trainings that we need to run, maintenance training, and even how to build that system. We have developed a concept. If team wants, we can always share this concept, but it's still under a draft. So we're planning to develop that a bit further with engaging with other stakeholders. We call this like a steering committee. We include some of our key stakeholders like Mark Ellery and other environmental specialists to help us develop this concept and hopefully do a detailed design and hopefully prototype it in that pilot committee. For the community, they are very happy with the system. It's like all they want is that system. It's like a priority for them. They've had enough with seeing feces floating up whenever there's rain and all this. So we believe what we're doing is a way forward for all communities experiencing this similar type of challenge. Thanks.
Excellent. And Steve, if you get a chance to turn on your camera, we'd love to see your face. No pressure though, if you, there we are. Yeah, just as part of our panel that rounds us out here as well. Steph, I saw you answered a couple of those questions with a little more detailed responses. We can provide those questions and answers as part of the resources. Anything you wanted to highlight from those that you've addressed?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. And thanks for the questions. And I think there's a question that I was starting answering, but maybe it's easier in terms of the monitoring and evaluation of this project, and also the uptake and the lessons learned. So what I was mentioning in the answer is that the idea is not only to develop another document to put on the shelf, but because of these different ways of involvement for a program, in particular with field professionals from Australian Volunteers Program, for example, or the New Zealand equivalent, VSA, Volunteer Service Abroad. The idea is to work closely with the teams to look at what, for example, monitoring and evaluation systems. So it's definitely not starting from scratch, but looking at what tools would be able to capture better and more systematically all the data for improved toilets in communities, improved toilets in health centers, in schools, and Ministry of Health has already some systems, but sometimes, this idea the maybe don't have all the right either teams, resources, or systems in place to be able to monitor in time and know how much impact we're actually having. So that's the work that our volunteers will be doing, and that's support which can't happen during the first phase of the project. So 2 years on, there's still a need to work on that. In terms of the uptake, there's very good feedback which came from 2 of the provincial teams in particular, where they're basically using the guidelines in their daily jobs, and were able to monitor the number of toilets built by communities, because the idea is that people are responsible for building their own toilet, but demonstration via the demonstration toilets, the teams are doing one example in communities, and then this is the communities are able to build their own toilets after that. So in terms of the lessons learned, I think the way the time and the type of tools with, I think Steve mentioned the empathy mapping, and taking the time for all these constellations meant that was a product which was known when the approval happened. And I think that's one of the key, and the same for the water project and the manuals. I feel like there was good ownership during the project, which meant that we've had now many requests from partners about what's the latest of the guidelines, so that, and they're able, because they were in this training of trainers, able to use it themselves in communities. So all these projects going through the channel of governments seem to make a difference, and I think the uptake is pretty good, just a couple of years or even less than a year for the water project.
Excellent. Always looking for the long-term benefit. You hate to go back and see something where resources were not utilized in a way that provided long-term benefits. Now, Emily, a question for you. We've just got a couple minutes left. If some donor came to you with funding for a water project and said, hey, I've got $100 million here, and you get to choose where that's allocated. Having traveled the globe, seen needs, seen all sorts of things out there where aid is needed, how would you allocate it? Where would that go? How would you prioritize where that money would be spent?
Well, I guess I want to say, building on everything that everyone just said there, I mean, I would make it, like Matthew said, multi-sectoral. So that might be a sector. What we mean is addressing all the needs of the children. I'm working on a program right now in Zambia where UNICEF works directly with the government and supports the government with education, nutrition, and water, sanitation, and hygiene for a child. So I feel like that kind of program where you're working with the government and you're really addressing all the needs of the most vulnerable children, that is where I would put my money. And so I'm grateful to be working here in UNICEF for UNICEF in Zambia, because I feel like actually the program I'm working on is pretty well designed. So
excellent. Yeah. Well, if maybe we'll just have closing remarks from everyone. We might go a couple minutes over here, but just thanks for those questions that have come in. Everybody looks at the world and thinks, oh boy, how can we help? What can we do? I hope we've given you some resources, some ideas where you can take your water skills and apply them. Somebody asked in the questions here, what can flood modelers do? We've talked about WASH. A big chunk of our audience, those attending, come from a flood modeling background or from a water modeling background, hydrogeology and things like that. How can we as engineers use those skills? And again, like I said, I've got an inbox full of about probably 50 or 60 unanswered emails from people in low-income countries who have not had access to the kinds of training that others might have. And if you want to get involved, send me an email. If you've got hours to volunteer, I will put you to work. I'll send you some of these emails, and if you've got the skills, you can help advise on how to best solve some of these problems. So there are needs out there. Immediately, we saw 2,500 people register for this webinar a couple of weeks ago on what to do about the flooding. How can we approach this? How can we do better going forward? Well, you've seen some answers right here. How we can approach. There are needs for engineers to go out and assess the buildings, see what's going to happen, even take the high water marks in. There are needs for people to spend days of their time out in the communities that have been devastated, helping. And I think that will absolutely aid any career, and it will aid everybody's mental health as well. These are things that can help us see how we're contributing and see these contributions put to good use. Excellent to have heard from you. Maybe let's just do some quick closing remarks from each of the presenters then, and then we'll show you some slides of some extra resources. Steve, over to you. Any closing remarks?
Great, nothing in particular. Just thanks so much for organizing this and inviting the Engineers Without Borders, especially from Vanuatu, like the in-country team. We were very appreciative of that. I would let Stephanie if he has any closing remarks for that. Thanks.
Thanks. Steph, over to you. Any closing remarks?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to emphasize what you were saying, Craig, in terms of we've just given an outline of some of the water and sanitation project, but back to the flood modelers and the needs for it. The Sanitation Challenging Environment project that Steve was talking about, very much the sort of study to understand well the flood impact and the scale to be able to design appropriately a sanitation system. This is typically the sort of thing that we would be able to incorporate in our program. So I think it's just about having the conversation and getting in touch with all these opportunities which come up. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Emily, close it up for us.
Yeah, I guess I just want to thank all of you. You are all water engineers or civil engineers, and what we do is preventative medicine. We stop people from getting sick, and no one ever thanks you for how many lives you saved from people who didn't die from diarrhea. But let me just say thank you to all of you, and keep using your skills in your communities to help your own communities as well. So thank you.
Excellent. And if nothing else, I hope everybody out there, if you weren't familiar with the term WASH before, now you are. It is a vital piece of water, the water sector, and I want hopefully everybody can be a little more well-versed in these terms going forward and see where these things can be put to use. So we'll see a few slides as we close out. Thanks to all these presenters. Again, if you want to get involved, we've got all these webinars out there. If you want to help put this free content out there on these webinars, contact me. Let me know, what are your ideas? How can we help serve the water sector? There are people who don't have the ability or the means to sign up for paid courses. And so if we can put some of this content out there for free, it gets out there to everyone in the world, regardless of income status. Most areas are able to at least patch in, even with a mobile phone, and watch some of these webinars. And it does serve the industry. So you will get a recording of this presentation emailed out to you if you registered for this webinar, and you'll get your certificate of attendance as well. Please do fill out this survey. Let us know what you'd like to hear in the future, and do sign up for some of our courses and webinars going forward. So with that, thanks to our volunteer presenters for today. Thanks for everybody who attended. We will see you again next time around through the Australian Water School. Goodbye.